Akashvani. All India Radio. Good evening, listeners. It is precisely 8 o'clock on this Saturday evening, the 24th of March, 1951. We interrupt our scheduled transmission of classical sitar recitals to bring you an extraordinary local bulletin. Reports have just reached our newsroom from the Willingdon Airfield and the New Delhi Flying Club regarding an astonishing aerial phenomenon observed this afternoon in broad daylight, an event witnessed by dozens of civil aviators, engineers, and foreign diplomats. We cross-live now to our special correspondent, Captain Ronald Hawkins, who has spent the last 2 hours interviewing the pilots on the tarmac at Safdarjung. Captain Hawkins, can you hear us? Reporter, Captain Hawkins, voice wind-swept, breathing heavily, competing with the background hum of airport aprons. I hear you loud and clear, Chowdhury. Though I must say, half the men down here haven't even taken their flight jackets off yet. They are too shaken to walk back to the clubhouse. Announcer. Ronald, paint the picture for us. What exactly happened over New Delhi this afternoon? Reporter. Well, Chowdhury, it was just around 4:15. The afternoon haze had cleared up nicely over the capital, and several members of the Delhi Flying Club were out on the practice circuit. Among them was Mr. J.R. Chowdhury, flying a standard Tiger Moth trainer. Suddenly, right over the western sector of the airfield, at an altitude I'd estimate to be roughly 9,000 or 10,000 feet, the sky simply stopped being normal. Announcer. Stop being normal? Are we talking about a weather anomaly, a freak dust storm rolling in from Rajasthan? Reporter. Negative, Chowdhury. Not a cloud in the sky. Mr. Chowdhury and 3 other independent witnesses on the ground, including a senior meteorologist from the Safdarjung Observatory, watched a formation of objects drop out of the upper blue with absolute, terrifying velocity. They weren't airplanes. They had no wings, no tail assemblies, no propellers, and 0 exhaust trails. Announcer. No wings and no engines. Then how were they sustained aloft, Ronald? Reporter. That's the part that has the aeronautical engineers scratching their heads raw, Chowdhury. They were perfectly circular, disc-shaped craft, gleaming like polished silver or chromium under the afternoon sun. They were rotating on a central axis at an incredible speed, creating this faint, luminous halo around their rims. Mr. Chowdhury radioed the control tower immediately, shouting that he was sharing airspace with objects moving at speeds that would tear a Spitfire apart. And then the maneuverability defied every known law of physics. Announcer. Maneuverability? Did they engage in evasive action? Reporter. They didn't just evade, Chowdhury, they played with the airspace. One moment they were hovering dead still over the Qutub Minar, defying gravity without a single rotor blade. The next second, they accelerated straight up into the stratosphere at an angle that would have caused any human pilot to black out from instantaneous G-force. The radar operators at the Civil Aviation Terminal tracked them on the auxiliary scopes before the equipment began to register severe electrical feedback. Announcer. Electrical feedback? Did the craft interfere with ground installations? Reporter. Ask the engineers at the radio beacon station, Chowdhury. Right at the exact moment the primary disc accelerated over the Yamuna River, every telephone exchange in South Delhi experienced a sudden, inexplicable voltage surge. Streetcar lines flickered out, and compass needles in 3 separate training aircraft spun wildly out of true north. The military elements of the Western Command have already dispatched an investigative team to interview the civilian flight instructors who watched the descent. Announcer. Thank you, Captain Hawkins. Stay on the line if you can. Listeners, you heard it directly from the tarmac. The government of India has not yet issued an official statement regarding the New Delhi Flying Club sighting, but inquiries are already flooding in from foreign embassies and international news agencies. Are these experimental high-altitude craft from foreign powers testing secret propulsion systems over the subcontinent? Or are we witnessing something far beyond our terrestrial borders? We will return with further updates on the hour. Until then, secure your windows, keep looking to the skies, and stay tuned to All India Radio. The broadcast fades into long, slow shortwave carrier wave hiss, mixed with the faint crackle of AN, isolated transmitter, shutting down for the night. Static burst, a sudden shift to AN auxiliary emergency frequency. Announcer, M.L. Chowdhury, voice tense, discarding his previous stately cadence. Hold on. Ladies and gentlemen, we are receiving an urgent red label wire coming into the newsroom right now. Please do not turn off your receivers. We have just established contact via landline with Flight Lieutenant V.K. Singh, stationed at the Palam Air Force Station. Lieutenant Singh, are you receiving us? Fighter pilot V.K. Singh, voice hoarse, competing with the shout of officers in a bustling military tent. I hear you, Chowdhury, but make it quick. We've just been ordered to scramble 2 vampire jets. Announcer. Scramble? Lieutenant Singh, are the objects still over the capital? Fighter pilot. They aren't just over the capital anymore, Chowdhury. They've dropped lower, sitting right above the ridge near Old Delhi at roughly 4,000 feet. They're completely stationary. But that's not what's causing panic at the base. 3 minutes ago, one of our ground radar calibration units attempted to sweep the lead disc with an active high-frequency radar pulse. Announcer. And what happened? Did they respond? Fighter pilot. They didn't shoot back, Chowdhury, and they didn't flee. They inverted. The spinning amber ring underneath the hull reversed direction instantly, and a beam of sheer, coherent light, not a laser but a thick column of pure luminescence, shot straight down into the Yamuna riverbed. The water didn't splash, it flashed into steam. The entire river section near the old railway bridge is boiling. The local civilian police are calling in reports of thousands of fish surfacing instantly, cooked by whatever thermal induction field those things are projecting. Announcer. Boiling the Yamuna in broad daylight? Good God, what are the ground troops doing? Fighter pilot. What can they do? The Sikh regiment out of the Red Fort tried to move anti-aircraft batteries into position near the banks, but the moment the turrets got within a mile of the craft, every single vehicle's electrical system died. Not a single engine will turn over. The batteries didn't just drain, they fused solid. We are launching the vampires on visual bearings alone, navigating with magnetic compasses that are spinning like clock hands. If these things are foreign experimental craft, they've rendered our entire defense grid completely blind. Announcer. Lieutenant, do you have visual contact from the runway right now? Can you see? Fighter pilot. Hold on, Jesus Christ. Announcer. Lieutenant? Lieutenant Singh, report. Fighter pilot, breathing shackily, distant roar of jet engines revving up. The lead disc, it's expanding. The outer rim just shed a ring of smaller metallic spheres that are scattering across the city skyline, like buckshot. They're dropping over Connaught Place, over the Secretariat. I've got to go. We're rolling down the tarmac right now. God help New Delhi. A deafening roar of de Havilland vampire jet engines oversaturates the microphone, followed by a piercing high-frequency squeal that overloads the studio transmitter. Announcer, whispering into the deadly silence of the sound booth. The military lines are dropping one by one. If you are listening in Delhi, in civil lines, in Carol Bagh, do not go out into the streets. The airspace over the capital belongs to something else now. All India Radio is attempting to maintain emergency relay, but as the power substations fail across the northern district, this may be our final transmission. The tape hiss surges, cutting off abruptly as the master power grid to the broadcasting house fails completely, plunging the frequency into total, unbroken dead air. The tape hiss deepens into a heavy, oaring silence as the backup diesel generators at the broadcasting house fail to kick in. Announcer M.L. Chowdhury, voice stripped of all professional detachment, whispering into a handheld emergency, battery-powered mic. The lights in the studio just went. The entire block pitch black. But we don't need studio lights to see outside anymore. LOW structural vibration begins to rattle the window frames of the broadcasting house, a vast sub-audible drone that sounds like 100 million bee wings beating in unison. Announcer. I'm walking over to the casement window overlooking Parliament Street. I shouldn't be doing it, but the temptation to look is absolute. The sky over New Delhi isn't blue anymore. It's a deep bruised violet, choked with a thick sulfurous haze rising off the boiling Yamuna. And hovering right above the Connaught Place circus, motionless, immense, casting a shadow that swallows entire avenues, is the primary disc. It's completely silent. No roar of jet engines, no prop wash. Just that metallic, mirror's edge sheen reflecting the fires breaking out in the commercial district below. The sound of distant glass shattering, followed by a sudden high-pitched metallic shriek over the external window mic. Announcer. The smaller spheres, the ones that broke away from the main hall, they're descending into the streets. They aren't dropping bombs. They're moving with absolute, unhurried precision down Jan Path, hovering just 10 feet off the pavement, right past the shuttered shops and abandoned cars. The crowd of people, clerks, vendors, police officers who abandoned their posts are standing frozen in the middle of the road, staring up at them. No one is running anymore. There's a strange, heavy pressure in the air, like the atmosphere itself is thickening into syrup, pressing down on our chests. Wait, one of the spheres has stopped directly outside the All India radio gates. A sharp harmonic chime, identical to the one recorded in Sweden, a pure mathematical chord, played on an unknown frequency, pierces the microphone. Announcer, breathing shallowly, voice trembling. The sound, it's going right through my skull. It doesn't hurt, but my thoughts feel like they're slowing down, sticking in place like oil. The sphere's outer shell is opening. It's not mechanical. The metal is sliding apart like liquid mercury, exposing a core of pure, blinding white light. It's projecting something onto the pavement, onto the walls of the buildings, geometric patterns, intricate, shifting symbols that no human eye has ever conceived. A sudden, ragged gasp. They aren't here to conquer. They aren't even here to fight. They're cataloging us. They're scanning the architecture, the soil, the blood in the streets, the history carved into these ancient stones, as if we were nothing more than a microscopic sample under a slide. The distant roar of a de Havilland vampire jet, plunging out of the sky, engines screaming in a desperate suicidal dive toward the main disk. Announcer. One of our jets, it's coming back. It's diving straight at the underside of the massive saucer. A sudden, blinding white flash of thermal energy that overloads every audio circuit on the frequency. Announcer screaming over the metallic wail. It's gone. The plane it didn't crash, it turned to ash before it even touched the hull. A deafening, all-consuming roar of frequency overload. Announcer, a final whispered gasp as the microphone diaphragm melts from induction. The age of man has just been cataloged and closed. The audio waveform flattens into a straight, unmoving line of dead static, fading slowly into absolute eternal silence. End of transcription. File archived under classified special incident 1951. Welcome back to the Paranormal State, Washington, and UFO UAP. With Makāula Nakae, a lifelong experiencer and ET contactee since 1990. Today's episode, 1951 New Delhi Flying Club. The March 24, 1951 encounter. Deep dive into the New Delhi Flying Club sighting. The historical account of the March 24, 1951 New Delhi Flying Club incident represents a watershed moment in Asian ufology and aviation history. Set against the backdrop of a newly independent India, rapidly modernizing its infrastructure and airspace, this daylight encounter brought together elite aerospace professionals who bore witness to a technological marvel operating entirely outside the boundaries of 1950s physics. An exhaustive examination of Part 1 of this landmark event breaks down into three critical operational layers. The geographical and temporal context of the sighting provided an environment where any anomaly in the local airspace would be instantly recognized and scrutinized. On the afternoon of March 24, 1951, the active civilian aerodrome and training facility, operated by the New Delhi Flying Club, situated at Safdarjung Airport, was a hive of activity. As India sought to build its sovereign aviation capabilities following independence in 1947, Safdarjung served as the premier civilian flight training center, hosting a constant rotation of training aircraft, maintenance engineers, and administrative officials. The sighting occurred in broad daylight under exceptionally clear, unblemished atmospheric conditions. The bright spring sun of late March over northern India provided optimal visibility, eliminating the possibility of optical illusions caused by low clouds, atmospheric inversions, or twilight refraction. The trajectory of the sighting began with an accidental convergence of expert observers stationed on the airfield grounds. In the late afternoon hours, a cluster of senior flying instructors, seasoned commercial aviators, student pilots undergoing ground school, and chief maintenance engineers were gathered outside the clubhouse and hangars. They were actively engaged in discussions regarding flight logs, training schedules, and aircraft maintenance. Without warning, the routine afternoon atmosphere was pierced by an intense, brilliant reflection of sunlight high above the northern horizon. The flash acted as a visual cue, drawing the collective gaze of the aviation professionals upward into the clear skies over the capital city. Emerging from the north, at an immense, unverified altitude, a massive, silent airborne body was observed crossing the sky above New Delhi. Because the observers were accustomed to tracking aircraft across predictable flight corridors, the appearance of this object immediately commanded absolute silence and rapt attention from everyone on the tarmac. The primary reason the 1951 New Delhi incident remains a foundational case in ufological history, distinguishing it from garden-variety civilian reports, lies in the professional profile of the witnesses. Ordinary civilian witnesses are frequently vulnerable to misidentifying weather balloons, astronomical bodies, or experimental military aircraft due to a lack of baseline aviation knowledge. In stark contrast, the members of the New Delhi Flying Club possessed elite professional credentials. These pilots and instructors had logged thousands of hours in the cockpit. They possessed instinctive, highly calibrated spatial awareness, allowing them to accurately judge angular velocity, distance, altitude, and trajectory. Intimate familiarity with 1950s aviation limits. The witnesses were intimately familiar with the absolute performance ceilings, acoustic signatures, and silhouette characteristics of every domestic and foreign aircraft operating in 1951. From early British and American piston engine trainers and commercial transports to the earliest generation of military jet fighters. Their collective consensus was immediate and unanimous. Whatever was traversing the skies above New Delhi was fundamentally unlike anything engineered by humankind at that point in history. Structural and kinematic specifications of the 1951 New Delhi craft. The credibility of the March 24, 1951 New Delhi Flying Club incident rests heavily upon the technical precision of the observations recorded on the tarmac at Safdarjung Airport. Because the witnesses were seasoned aviators, flight instructors, and engineers whose daily lives revolved around the meticulous analysis of aircraft design, weight distribution, aerodynamics, and propulsion. Their breakdown of the object's physical form and flight dynamics transcends ordinary civilian testimony. An exhaustive examination of Part 2 reveals the staggering technological profile of the craft that traversed the Indian capital. The physical architecture of the object challenged every known canon of 1950s aerospace engineering, presenting a radical departure from conventional fixed-wing or rotary design. The pilots estimated the object to be an enormous, rigid cigar-shaped or cylindrical hull, measuring approximately 100 feet in length, with some secondary estimations pushing the scale even larger. In 1951, a 100-foot airborne structure was comparable in scale to large commercial transport aircraft or heavy multi-engine military bombers. Yet it lacked any of the structural load-bearing infrastructure typical of those designs. The craft possessed a smooth, highly polished exterior surface that reflected the harsh afternoon sun with blinding brilliance. However, unlike contemporary aluminum-skinned aircraft, which featured visible rows of flush rivets, overlapping panel seams, skin-fang joints, and structural stiffeners, this hull appeared utterly uniform. It looked as though it had been cast or molded from a single, seamless piece of seamless material. Most critically, the pilots verified the complete absence of wings, tail assemblies, empennage, horizontal or vertical stabilizers, rudders, elevators, propellers, air intakes, or visible exhaust ports. By all aerodynamic principles taught in 1951, an object lacking lift-generating wings and thrust-generating propulsion mechanisms should not have been capable of sustained level flight, let alone high-speed cruising. In an era when aviation was defined by the raw, deafening power of high-compression piston engines and the piercing, high-pitched shriek of early turbojets, such as the Rolls-Royce Derwent or de Havilland Goblin engines powering contemporary military jets, acoustic behavior was a primary signature of flight. Despite traversing the airspace directly above a major urban center at relatively low atmospheric altitudes, The massive cylinder produced absolute acoustic silence. There was no engine roar, no mechanical vibration, no propeller thrum, and crucially, no sonic boom, despite the object's immense velocity. For a 100-foot solid mass to displace air at high speeds without generating a thunderous displacement shockwave, or mechanical noise, terrified and baffled the professional aviators on the ground, pointing toward a propulsion system operating via field mechanics or mass reduction rather than conventional thrust reaction. The flight dynamics witnessed by the New Delhi Flying Club members represented the most disruptive element of the encounter, demonstrating a complete defiance of momentum and Newtonian physics. The massive cylinder executed rapid, high-speed travel across the city skyline, demonstrating turning radiuses and directional changes that defied inertia. A craft of that physical mass moving at high velocity would normally experience extreme structural stress and g-force limitations during sharp vector shifts. This object turned effortlessly on a dime. The observers mentally and professionally cross-referenced the object's performance against the absolute limits of the era's military technology. Neither the Indian Air Force's frontline fighters, the British Royal Air Force's inventory, nor the secret experimental aircraft of the emerging Cold War superpowers, the US and the Soviet Union, could match the speed, acceleration, or climb rate exhibited by the cylinder. The encounter culminated in a maneuver that left the pilots utterly astounded. After crossing the field of vision over New Delhi, the craft ceased its horizontal trajectory and initiated a steep, near-vertical climb directly into the upper stratosphere. It accelerated upward at vertical velocities that outstripped the maximum climb performance of any interceptor aircraft of 1951, vanishing into the upper atmosphere in a matter of seconds. The March 24, 1951 New Delhi Flying Club incident transcended the status of a local anomaly because of who witnessed it and where it occurred. In the opening years of the Cold War, as newly independent India navigated a delicate stance of non-alignment while establishing its sovereign military and civil aviation infrastructure, an incursion by an unidentifiable, high-performance craft over the capital city triggered immediate administrative and intelligence ripples. An exhaustive examination of Part 3 reveals how official authorities reacted to the event and why it remains a monumental touchstone in global ufology. In 1951, global intelligence agencies were on high alert for foreign espionage, advanced spy planes, and strategic reconnaissance vehicles as the Cold War escalated. Because the primary observers were elite aviation instructors, senior civil pilots, and chief engineers connected to Safdarjung Airport, a facility closely tied to the Directorate General of Civil Aviation and early military coordination, the sighting was not casually brushed aside as harmless folklore. Internal reports were swiftly compiled and routed through civil aviation channels to military intelligence officers. India had gained its independence from the British Empire only 4 years prior, in 1947. Retaining a hybrid of British administrative frameworks, alongside newly minted domestic institutions, the Indian government was fiercely protective of its national airspace. The appearance of a massive, silent, maneuverable craft that defied interception by any domestic or foreign air force presented an unsettling national security puzzle. Much like contemporary occurrences in the United States and Great Britain during the early 1950s, such as the 1952 Washington, D.C. flap, official military evaluation of the New Delhi incident resulted in strict operational classification. Authorities recognized that admitting inability to track, identify, or intercept an unknown vehicle over the capital would expose vulnerabilities in national air defense. Consequently, official government files were quietly shelved under military discretion, leaving the public record to be preserved primarily through the oral testimonies and private documentation of the aviation community. While mainstream newspapers did not feature wall-to-wall hysteria, the incident resonated deeply within specialized technical and professional networks. Within days, word of the sighting spread across South Asian flight schools, military bases, and civil aviation clubs. Pilots across the subcontinent began looking at the skies with renewed scrutiny, realizing that commercial and training airspace was shared with phenomena far beyond conventional aviation parameters. The case eventually caught the attention of early international ufology researchers and civil investigators, such as those collecting global anomaly reports in the pre-Project Blue Book era. It served as a critical empirical data point, shattering the emerging misconception that unidentified aerial phenomena were exclusively an American or Western European phenomenon. The New Delhi incident demonstrated that anomalous objects were operating with total impunity across sovereign borders worldwide, unhindered by international boundaries, Cold War rivalries, or national air defense grids. Decades after the event, the 1951 New Delhi Flying Club sighting stands as a gold standard for historical close encounters of the first and second kind. In an era before consumer camcorders, digital photography, or advanced radar tracking networks in developing nations, the human eye and the trained mind constituted the ultimate sensor array. The New Delhi case proved that the most rigorous validation of non-human technology came not from casual hobbyists, but from professional aviators whose livelihoods depended on absolute mastery of the sky. Today, the incident is studied by historians of science and ufology alike as a foundational pillar of Asian UFO history. It preserves a vital reminder that long before the modern digital age, the skies over our planet were occasionally visited by technologies that utterly dismantled our understanding of physics, engineering, and human supremacy over the atmosphere. To be continued. Watch and listen. Watch the cinematic video trailer. Listen to the full podcast now. Explore the archived Cosmic Awakening Volume 1, 1991, Peru, Journey into the Unknown. Sacred Valley of the Incas. Volume 2, Ascension 2012, The Golden Alchemy. Part 3, The First Contact and the Paranormal State. Join the journey. New episodes drop periodically. Each chapter delivers a tight, hyper-focused 10 to 30-minute exploration into the evolution of ufology, perfect for your daily plunge into decoding hidden messages from outer space, designed to raise awareness and foster human evolution. Subscribe to support your inner development. Thumbs up to help push our channel through the algorithm. Comment below. Share your thoughts on today's episode.